cannot hear me? One person can hear me? Okay. All right, I woke up with a little bit of a sore throat, so I'm going to try to like maybe even shout a little bit. All right, so we're here in Nashville, first Serverless Days Nashville, only my second time being in Nashville. My first time was for my Microsoft interview, so this is a great town. So we're going to talk a little bit about DevOps and how it pertains to developers and developer process in a serverless world. So this is me. This is actual video of me at work. I work for Microsoft. I'm a specialist on our global black belt team, so I'm focusing a lot on open source technology and cloud native technologies, and of course serverless. And I love serverless, and I love talking about it and thinking about all the unique problems that we have, and the great things about it as well. And of course, say hello to Clippy. I'm from Norfolk, Virginia. It's a pretty short flight from here. I love Norfolk. I love doing things in the community in Norfolk. I organize Norfolk.js and also NodeBots Norfolk, which is JavaScript-powered robots. So every summer, we get about 300 people together, and we battle JavaScript-powered robots, and it's pretty awesome. And also, since I'm in Virginia, I have to talk about serverless in Virginia. So our state motto is Virginia's for lovers. So I like to say Virginia's for serverless lovers. And I have some photos here of some serverless evangelists that either live in Virginia or in and around Virginia. And I've got my special hashtag Serverless here. But since I'm saying that serverless is important in Virginia, I kind of feel like maybe I need a little bit of like proof. So I went to Google Trends and searched for serverless. And Virginia is number 3 on this list, right after District of Columbia, which is almost essentially Virginia too, because most people who work there live in Virginia. So Google Trends never lie. So this shows that people in Virginia care about serverless and that it's important. But maybe one or two of you have heard before that there's actually servers with serverless, like maybe. So I also did a trend search on servers. And it turns out that people in Alaska are very concerned about servers. So maybe if someone's reminding you that there's actually servers, like maybe they're from Alaska or West Virginia or Idaho. And maybe these are areas where they just have mainframes like in the mountains also. Thanks, Nashville. I'm really glad to be here. I'm glad to meet new people, see old friends, be here with some of my Microsoft colleagues. Please go visit our booth. We have 2 booths, and there's one right there in the back, and with Tommy and Jeremy, and they have lots of good swag. So go to the booth, ask for swag, let them scan your badge, get cool stuff. All right, so let's get started. And it's going to get a little weird, but that's cool, because we're already caffeinated and we're ready to go. So we're going to talk about serverless and developers. And so funny story, I'm talking to my mom, and I'm like, yes, I'm doing a talk, and there's going to be people there. It's a serverless conference, and she watches all of my videos. So she actually has a pretty good concept of like what serverless is from my point of view. And so she's like, what's your talk about tomorrow? And so I'm thinking like, how do I explain like DevOps to my mom, who's now somewhat technical about serverless? And so I said, it's about habits, good habits and bad habits, and how your habits might be different in a serverless environment. So that's how I'm going to stage this talk. Also, this is a gift from Mystic Pizza. It's a deep cut. There's any Julia Roberts fans. And also, too, so my theme today for my deck is going to be 1988. And simply just because I think it's a great year. My husband was born in 1988. There are lots of great movies from 1988, including Roger Rabbit. Got a GitHub repo. It's 1988. If you want to break every library that works great for you on a daily basis, you create a repo with all numbers. and then you just decide to name services all numbers. Like, you just break everything. It's been really fun debugging NPM modules and figuring out all the fun things. Like, TypeScript will really mess you up if you have like a service that's all numbers. So anyway, some places I had to change that just to get around it. But yeah, so Coming to America, Beetlejuice, Heathers, like a lot of movies that I was really into when I was sort of growing up and just was watching over and over again. And about the time that we could actually afford to have movies that were recorded from cable on VHS tapes was about 1988. And I think my last talk I did was sort of Bill and Ted inspired, and I thought Bill and Ted was 88, but it was actually 87. So no Bill and Ted, but it'll be all right. So we're going to talk about developers first, and sort of traditional development and just developer culture and how developers operate. And so they have lots of opinions. Twitter, Reddit, Stack Overflow, the hallway out there, people have opinions about everything, especially about code. And they really love process and best practices, and they like to defend their best practices, certainly. And so these are the things, some of the things that they really need. I say they, but it's really like us, right, me. Developers, like, what do we need to create our best code? What do we need to be comfortable? What are the types of tools or processes that we might swap in and out? And that's like our editor, our language of choice, maybe languages of choice, frameworks, you know, a code formatting tool, also maybe a formatting tool for prettiness, so maybe we lent the code, and then also we just kind of want to make it look pretty, like we want our spaces and tabs and everything to be in the right spot, and we want that to be the same across our team. Real-time static code analysis, so we can maybe discover bugs that we don't know existed yet, just because we typed something wrong, or we put something in our code, we put an Easter egg in there that we didn't know about, and that sort of thing. And so there's a lot of tools that we can use to get there, like lots and lots and lots of tools, lots of languages, lots of frameworks, and all of these things. Someone loves everything that's on this screen right now, and they love it enough to fight for it, and that's okay. I love things here too. And so I'm just, I just want to stress that, as developers, we just, most of us, like, we really love what we do, and we really love our tools, and we just want to feel super comfortable, and we know what helps us be able to type faster and, like, really be the most agile we can be. So then, once the code is written, then we want to test the code. And even while we're writing the code, then maybe we're thinking about something like pair programming. Maybe someone else wrote the test, and I wrote the code, or we're together and I'm telling someone else what to type, and then they're typing, and between the two of us we're creating better code. I've worked in shops where pair programming was mandatory, and I personally hated that, but some people love it because they're extroverts and they just find that, like, talking to someone about their problem, like, helps them solve it. That's fine, that's okay. We're all opinionated, it's all fine. Very opinionated testing framework, lots of testing frameworks. We all have the one we want. Unit tests, integration tests, not just the tooling there, but how do we write them? What do we want them to look like? I've certainly had people, like, die on very small testing hills. I used to be a Java programmer, I should throw that out there, although I've been writing mostly Node.js for the last maybe 7 years or so. Before that, I was a Java programmer for 5 years. So I've seen people die on many, many, many hills. And code coverage. And I add this on here too because I almost think it's sort of funny, because every shop is always like, yeah, we're aiming towards a code coverage of 90%. And I've, like, just never really seen it. Not really, not unless there's, like, a few lines, but this is what we're all aiming for. And yeah, oh my gosh, we finished the code, we wrote the tests, like, but should we have written the tests before? Maybe. There's someone else's strong developer opinion. Who was alive in 1988 in this room? Okay, like a lot of people. All right, we got some old folks in here. All right, okay, all right, go Gen X. All right, so now we're gonna commit this code because we've written the code, but we need a history of our changes. This is really important to us as developers. I mean, we would never write code and then like save it on our hard drive somewhere. Never, ever. No one's ever done that. We always save it to a revision control system. And we're very opinionated about it. I mean, the GitHub and GitLab people certainly will, throw down. That's okay. That's our opinion. Branching strategies, my Git flow, GitHub flow, something else flow, like whatever the, sort of latest and greatest branching strategies and Git strategies. Commit messages. I mean, I'm sure we've all probably worked on a team with someone who that was their thing, was like all of our commit messages are all gonna be congruent. So that's a thing. Like I'm saying, everyone has like their small hill, everyone has their opinions because we love what we do, we're very passionate about it. And then the branch names. Like, do they match the task? Do they have some, strange number attached to them that attaches to some project management system? Could go on and on. And once again, my little animated slide of all the various things that we love. And once again, everyone loves something here on this slide. So then our ultimate goal then is to get our code to master, or maybe to a dev branch, but to get our code away from our development machines, away from our feature branches into the master repository. And so mostly in this talk, I'm talking about developers and developer flow. So I'm not really so much talking about the DevOps process to get us all the way to production, but how do we as developers get to a stable dev environment where multiple developers are testing, or how do we get to a test environment where then maybe a team is doing some manual testing? And so how we do that is then we've already committed our code. We're pushing that now to a dev branch, and then we need to create a pull request. We need to make sure all of our tests are passing. And then once we issue that pull request, then we really should be asking for the opinions of our coworkers, which can be a little dangerous. And they're going to have their own opinions about your code. And sometimes developer teams have a collective opinion that then they enforce. Or sometimes you just get a rogue person who's like, why didn't you squash all that? And then someone else is like, no, we squash nothing because we're open. So yeah, sometimes reviewers can be tough, but it's important because we want at least another person to kind of look over our code and have some thoughts and maybe like make us think a little differently. Maybe branch out of our opinions just a tad. Okay, so looks good to me. Your code is now merged. It's now in your dev branch or your test branch, and it's ready to go to some sort of testing environment. And so now maybe we're queuing our CI/CD tool right now. So either when I first committed the code or when that pull request gets pulled in, our CI/CD tool is doing some work here. Two of my favorite movies from 1988. I couldn't decide which one to use in the slide, so I just went with both. And once again, we've got lots of CI tools. I'll be talking about Azure Pipelines a little bit when I'm doing my demo and GitHub Actions. But I've used a lot of tools here. I used, for most of my career as a Node developer, I used Travis CI. And so a lot of these tools are similar. But once again, it's a tool that you're using probably every day as you're committing code, and this tool is like helping you run all these analysis and also doing the deployment. So it's very important. All right, so now the code is now deployed to our dev or staging environment. Short Circuit 2 came out in 1988, by the way. I don't know when 1 came out, but this is 2. All right, so this is what everyone's here for. I just talked about the old way of doing things, the right way of doing things, what we're used to, traditional. All right, now here comes the Wild Wild West. And so if you take anything from my talk or anything, I want you to know that serverless is for developers. It is for us. We should be the ones to love it. The infrastructure people, they don't care about serverless. They want to infrastructure, and we don't. We don't want to care about infrastructure. We don't want to care about containers. How does it get deployed? What's it getting deployed to? We don't care. And serverless allows us to not care. And Tiny Tim believes that serverless is for developers. So here's some bullets on like why I feel like it's for developers. And I've already kind of said, like, the focus is on code, not infrastructure. We are developers. We care about all these things that, I've kind of gone over already. And in all of those slides where I'm talking about the developer process, like, I'm not mentioning Docker at all. And sometimes that's a way that we have to go to get things to a different environment, but not necessarily if we're building a serverless architecture. And it just naturally lends to an event-driven architecture, which is very familiar to a lot of us, especially as enterprise developers, and it's something that we like, and it allows us to naturally decouple all of our services. And so we like that. And also, even though we're developers, we also don't necessarily want to write code all day and be coders, typing constantly. So, serverless architecture allows us to write less code. In James's talk, he was showing about how if you're using Express, like how much more code is involved than if you're using, FaaS and like an API gateway or something similar. And that's true. If you're using services in the cloud, you just naturally get to write less code, which is great. And also, these individual functions, whether they're Azure functions or Lambda or Cloud functions, these building blocks of serverless architecture are just naturally microservices. So we can create these microservices architectures much easier. So serverless is for us. So now back to the process. What's the development process now that you're in a serverless environment? It is not ghosts. And so now I'm going to queue up my pre-recorded demo of a serverless developer. And a serverless developer that I've seen a lot. And so we're not going to judge, but we're just going to watch this video of this dramatic reenactment. And so this developer he's in the AWS console, updating his MySpace updater for production. And so he's making some changes in there. As his reviewer, I'm seeing a couple little problems. And now he is publishing. So he was just in the console, typed some stuff, and then he pushed to production. And so that seems a little scary. But I've done it. And I'm sure you all have done it. And we see customers doing it all the time because it's easy and we want to get there fast, but also it's a strange environment. And, it's just when you go into these pretty consoles, like let's say on, the Azure portal, there's like examples and you just very much want to get in there and just start typing and then hit the submit button. So we'll just kind of look more closely at the code here that he's changing, so you can kind of maybe see a few little issues in here. So he's completely bypassing everything that is important to us. No static code analysis, no editor prettyifying in here. Type it in the console and hit submit. And I've been, back when I was in consulting and even now sort of talking to customers, I hear it all the time where I will say, what editor do you use or what tools are you using? We use the console. Put it in there and we hit the button. And that just always seems very odd to me. It seems reasonable in this new environment, but it seems odd to me coming from a development background. And knowing how developers are, and knowing how, I've had developers die on those small hills of DevOps, and then I'm like, oh, but now you push to production. Okay. All right. I got you do you. But yeah, unfortunately, all these wonderful managed services in these clouds, like garbage in, garbage out, my friends, like they cannot help you with your terrible code. So you still have to go deep inside of your heart and find those things that are important. So yeah, so why, and I've talked about this a little bit already, but like why do developers, who have such strong opinions and have these DevOps processes and just even like developer good practices, why do they throw that all away when they're building applications, when they're building like serverless applications in the cloud? And that's because like it can be a little scary. Child's Play also came out in 1988. Yeah, it can be a little scary. I mean, it's a new environment. And I've mentioned too that people do just want to kind of get there quickly. But a lot of times though, I think that people don't see it as being the same. Even if they're creating some functions and they're creating a serverless architecture, they're creating even a simple web app using functions as a service, they'll go back to writing maybe some traditional web application and they'll go back to their normal process. And then they go back to the cloud and they, YOLO code. Because yeah, it's a little scary and sometimes you're not making the connection between the two. But ultimately, all of the best practices that exist in traditional development, they still exist here, but more. We have way more tools. We have way more services. We have services that are already written and tested by cloud platforms that have like way bigger problems than probably you will ever have. And so you should not only double down on your process, but you should make your process better because there's more tools to do that. Here's your, brand new tool that you brought home from your cloud platform, your shiny new tool that won't, turn on you and hurt your family, certainly. All right, so I'm going to do a demo. I'm going to kind of use a few of my opinionated tools and kind of go through a developer workflow and kind of look at what that would look like. And here's sort of my tool set. So I'm going to use Node.js. That's sort of my favorite. I'm going to use Serverless Framework. I don't have to use Serverless Framework, but I kind of like it, especially for a demo like this. It just kind of creates some consistency. GitHub. Azure Pipelines is going to do most of the work here, and then I have a couple GitHub actions. And right now, a lot of my GitHub actions are just sort of like helper libraries, but really they could replace pipelines in this scenario. But there's just reasons why I might use one or the other, and a lot of it's opinion. And then this here is my 1988 repository. So let's go over here and look at 1988. And so the purpose of this platform is to use this very complex algorithm to determine what is the best of 1988. It's not complex. I'm sure people are looking at the code and they're like, this looks like a Giphy pasted in here. That's because it is. And so here I have, I've got just sort of a simple mono repo, and I've got folders here for 3 different services for 3 different cloud platforms. Yes, you might notice I have both Azure Functions and Lambda in my opinionated stack, and I work for Microsoft, but hell's freezing over every day at Microsoft. And DevOps is really important to us, and if I'm talking about DevOps and serverless, then I think it helps to show that with multiple platforms. But only Amazon and Microsoft are sponsoring this conference, so those are the only 2 platforms I'm going to deploy to. So if I look inside my service here, and the conference Wi-Fi is still kind of holding up here, so that's good. Just want to point out a couple of things. So I've got one handler, which is the main handler that I'm going to be dealing with here. And then I have a couple YAMLs. So this is my serverless YAML. How many people are familiar with serverless framework? Have used serverless framework? Okay, all right, so a lot of people. So this is sort of the meat of it. This sort of, and I've got a bunch of comments and things in here. But this is going to use the Azure plugin for serverless framework. And there's a fairly new release of that too that was worked on by some of our colleagues here at Microsoft. So this is a really cool tool. But anyway, this is my serverless YAML. Got way too many comments in there, but got a reference to my plugin. And this just sort of tells Serverless Framework how I want to package up this service and deploy it. And the service name here is Best of 1988 because Serverless Framework was one of those things that completely blew up every single plugin and just like the main library because it didn't like the all numbers. So I'll do some PRs. I think there's a Serverless Framework person here. I'll talk to him. And then there's my pipeline YAML. So this is for Azure Pipelines, which is part of the Azure DevOps suite. So Azure Pipelines, this YAML, if you've used Travis CI or Circle CI or some other tools, this is going to look very familiar to you. I mean, this is pretty common here. But here, this is basically my process. I'm installing Serverless Framework. I'm going to run a linter. I'm going to do an npm install. I'm going to do an npm test. I'm going to run, all one of my unit tests that I have in this service. I've got some secret keys that are going to be stored in Azure Pipelines, and and they could be in Key Vault or something like that as well. But this just basically is going to talk about my deployment there. And then also, in the root of this repo, there's this workflows folder, which is for my GitHub Actions. And so this is a little bit redundant because I'm doing a lot of similar things. Can you all see that? Should I bump up? Do you want me to bump up the font a little bit? Is that anyone unhappy? No? Okay, one person is unhappy. That's all right. That's good. That's a good ratio for me. So this is doing some very Node.js specific things here and checks that I'm running, all of my very opinionated checks. And I'm doing this on pull request. That's the event here. But like I said, it is a little bit redundant because I'm doing the same thing with pipelines. But I just kind of wanted to show this as an alternative. All right. And then this is my Azure DevOps project for 1988. And good for Azure DevOps that I can call it 1988 and didn't cause some sort of error. And there's a suite of tools in here. I don't have them all shown, but I have boards in here. I have test plans in here. Maybe one of the reasons why I would want to use pipelines here is because I would want kind of direct access to some of these other services, and maybe I care about some of these graphs and things. That's not good that the last pipelines I ran are X's, but we'll get there. I didn't pay any homage to the demo gods. I should have had like a Tiny Tim GIF, with some love to the demo gods to ensure, but that's okay. So my very opinionated editor here is going to be VS Code. VS Code has lots of extensions, and I already have in my code here, so I've already cloned this repository here. And in this repository, it's already automatically running my ESLint for Node.js. So that's kind of already part of my process that I have here. And then in each one of these, I have a handler. As you can see with this iframe, this is my super complex algorithm to determine the best of 1988. For my demos, I don't try to get too complicated. I don't try to write good code for demos because it's all just going to do what it's going to do anyway. And so I'm just going to make a couple changes to these files here. And so those are just my handlers. If I was doing something weird that was going to violate ESLint, then it would already flagged me here. Now from this point, I'd probably do a serverless deploy if I was using Serverless Framework, or if I was using like the Azure Functions extension or something, I would probably try to like test this offline. But I'm not gonna like really tax the conference internet like that. So I'm already on a branch called Nashville, and I've got a couple modified things here. And so I'm just gonna add these. I'm going to type very slowly because for some reason when I'm demoing, I just want to type really, really fast, and there's like letters everywhere, and people in the audience are like, you are not a developer. What are you doing? Okay. See, I'm already making mistakes. It's not Nashville. All right. So, come on, internet. Woohoo, it's doing something. All right, so I'm pushing now to this branch in the repo in GitHub. And so now I'm pretty much done with VS Code. So now let's go to GitHub. And so now GitHub knows that I just pushed some to this branch. All right, and here's my pull request. And so here's my opportunity here where if I wanted to add some reviewers, I could here. And then this is an open source repo, totally open to the world. And so here's a chance for all of my coworkers to say terrible things about my code publicly. And I used to work for an open source company. And that was definitely, before I worked for the open source company, I worked for the government. So that was a weird shift from everything being so secret about what people thought about each other to here's the universe, knowing that you did or did not put a semicolon at the end of that line. Okay. So it takes kind of a second to like kick off sometimes, especially if I've got the GitHub Actions in there. All right, cool. So here's so I have another weird GitHub action that I put in there that just automatically creates pull requests, but it's like not working for whatever reason. But I don't think it's a approved action. I think it's just one that somebody made. So if I look at details, this is now my Node.js action that's kind of running through. It's just testing for Node 12 right now for LTS, but it's running through all the processes here. And it ran pretty fast, and so that one is, I've passed that. Now, one thing to note too in my pipelines, let me actually just go back to the code because I forgot to mention this. Things are getting a little slow. Come on. Is here at the bottom, I have this line, which this line is telling pipelines, don't deploy if this is a pull request. Just because I want the pull request to that check to happen a lot faster. Maybe I would want it to deploy. If it's a dev environment, then maybe I would want to see that pass before I pulled into that repository. But in this case, I'm not. So when these checks run, there's not going to be a deployment. But we've got time. We've got 50 whole minutes here. All right, and so all of these now have passed. These are my 2 pipelines. And that's good. I don't know why they were red earlier. I think all I did was change docs earlier, but it's DevOps. Sometimes one just decides to fail. All right, so I'm in my Microsoft pipeline now, and then I'm inside of Azure pipelines. There's a lot to talk about in pipelines, but since we're in a general DevOps talk, I'm going to kind of keep that a little bit light. But it shows here all the various steps of things that I'm doing inside of this pipeline. And this really helps for debugging. You can see pretty clearly. If something fails, you can understand quickly why it failed, like if something didn't install. You can see just like you would in the console. And my linter. And then here, my deployment isn't green because I didn't deploy. Okay, so let me go back to GitHub. I'm going to say this is good. I'm the reviewer. I said it was great. Looks good to me. And now I'm going to merge. All right, and now I'm going to delete a branch. This is a hill I die on. And I don't know if anyone else dies on this hill, but after I merge in a pull request, I want to delete that branch immediately. For some reason, like it makes me feel good. I'm like, ooh, it's gone. I merged it. But I'll go through lots of open source repos for big companies, and I'll just see 5 million feature branches, and I'm just like, oh, I just have the heebie-jeebies. That's my weird thing. That's my hill. All right, so I just pulled that in. So now my pipelines are going to run again. And so now this is them working. And so this time they're going to go through all the checks. But then this time they're also going to deploy. So right now it's installing serverless framework. So this is the Amazon pipeline here. They're all pretty much the same. I tried to keep them the same here. And that's part of why I'm using serverless framework in this demo, is because I kind of just like the consistency of everything for demoing. And Microsoft is still running. So while these are running, I have a little bit of a break. I have to show you all the Christmas gift I got this year from Trek 10. So my friends at Trek 10 are a consulting company. I know Amy is here. I don't know who else is here from Trek 10. But because of, I love the 80s, they sent me a Revenge of the Nerds Lambda 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 sweater with my name on it. And I was going to put it on while AWS was deploying, but when I was testing it, let me hold this up to you in the photo op. When I was trying to get this on, it was pretty awkward, and it was going to tear my microphone off. So anyway, you can pretend, I'll just, I'll do there. Since I'm deploying both, I've got my Azure sweatshirt on and my Lambda 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 sweatshirt with my name. And I can assure you that no one else at Microsoft has this sweater. Jeff Holland is very jealous right now. All right, so Amazon has deployed. So let's look at what it did. So this deployed my, my web app that we saw earlier. Pretty simple HTTP call. And so here now in the logs for this deployment, this is all just serverless framework, blah, blah, blah. Here is my link here for this. Before we look at this link, we've got the best of 1988. This is my complicated algorithm here, which determined, my AWS Lambda determined that the best of 1988 is actually the Rickroll. And it has Hello Nashville in here, so I didn't actually lie about that. No real audience dancing or anything? No love for the Rickroll? Come on, you just got Rickrolled before 11 a.m., everyone. Okay. Microsoft is still deploying. We're not going to talk about why it's taking longer. Just thinking about it. Let's see where it is. We've already Rickrolled. I already put on a new sweater. Come on. All right. And now we've got an Azure function deployed. There we go. And once again, here is all of my information about the deployment. Here, this is a feature request, I guess, is that I need a clickable link here for my serverless deployment. Same thing though, super important, complicated algorithm, best of 1988, once again, never gonna give you up. All right. No applause, no, I mean, there's just like some hatred in this room for the Rickroll. Okay, so anyway, so now that completes my demo. We've determined the best of 1988 out of everything. I mean, maybe the best of 1988 is actually still Beetlejuice, but anyway, you have to have a Rickroll in there somewhere. All right, so to conclude, so no ops doesn't mean no DevOps. Yeah, we're cutting the infrastructure out of here. It's starting to get really hot with this sweater. We're cutting out a lot of the infrastructure. We're abstracting things away. We're getting rid of things that we don't care about as far as what it takes to deploy our applications. But that doesn't mean we get rid of DevOps. And also, FaaS is not revision control. Like, yeah, it does keep track of versions. So technically, yes, but no, it's not the same as GitHub. So please don't write code in the console. Like, I know you want to. I've done it. I'll do it tomorrow. I mean, I'll go in there and I'll do it. But like, don't. Not for like real systems. Do it for your play stuff. Testing in prod isn't testing. We think we know that, but Yeah, sometimes that console is a prod app. You know, abstraction is not CI/CD. Yeah, I mean, just because we're using these managed services in the cloud, we still need our tool set. We still need the things we care about. And ultimately, like, don't abandon what's important. We're all developers. Now, that doesn't mean that, you know, if I write 1 million lines of code in a day, that I'm like, now that I write serverless, I'm still writing 1 million lines of code. No, don't do that. Like, appreciate what's good in the cloud. But as far as, I mean, best practices are there for a reason. There's a reason why we lint our code. There's a reason why we test our code, why we ask our friends what their opinions are about our code. It's very important, so we should continue to care about that. Okay. And that is the end. Special thank you to my husband, who was the YOLO developer, who also works for GCP, who was writing Lambda. We have a weird family. All right, thank you. Thanks, everyone.